welcome to the Culture Cast. I'm Cristachio, and I'm joined once again by my good friend, the host of the Projection Booth podcast, Mr. Mike White.
Hey, Chris.
And I am also joined by my good friend. She's one half of the One Season Show and one half of the upcoming Scary Stories We Tell podcast, Jess Byard.
Hello.
Does that mean you're a quarter of the One Season Show?
Yeah.
No, you're half of one.
I'm half.
One and
Okay.
a quarter. One half of a half of a half. Whatever that
Well,
means.
I mean, technically, two halves of a podcast make one podcast. So I am the host of one full podcast.
It's true. It's true. On this episode of the Culture Cast, we are finally finishing Mike White March. Now, it has nothing to do with Mike, but if you're listening to this, you know that March has been a taxing month emotionally and mentally for a lot of us. And Mike somehow predicted all of this happening by picking post-apocalyptic sci-fi. And I wasn't intentionally post-apocalyptic, right?
No, I did not set out for that.
I just kind of that's just kind of the
That was kind of the underlying
if it's Eastern
theme.
European sci-fi, it's going to be dystopian.
It's kind of the way it seems, for sure, because every film, I think, is dystopian except for Secret of Steel City, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So, on this episode, we're talking about the final film of Mike White March, A Visitor to a Museum, which is directed, once again, by our friend, Konstantin Lopushanskiy. It's also written by Konstantin Lopushanskiy. It stars Viktor Mikhailov as the main character, who has a name, I'm sure, maybe not, probably not, because I couldn't find one. If you look on IMDb and you look on Wikipedia, the two places you would find such things, I couldn't find him. And the film, it's a film.
I think his name is The Visitor.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I'm curious, Mike, because I ask you this every year before every movie we talk about. Why did you pick A Visitor to a Museum?
Well, kind of like all the others, this has been on my to-watch list for a long time, and plus this was the second Lopushanskiy film, like literally his second feature-length film, and I was very curious where he would go after Letters from a Dead Man.
He went
That's
somewhere.
all. It sounds like I enjoyed this one a little bit more than you guys did.
Well, let me ask you, Jess, what did you think of this film?
Which one did we watch before? How long ago was that? Which one was I on before last time?
How many
Yeah, that's
moons
it.
ago was that?
Eons, yes.
Yeah.
Oba. So I, like I said, when we talked about that, I did enjoy that one. This one, though, I think that I fall more in how Chris felt about Oba, in that, I know basically what happened, but I don't know if I care. I don't think I cared. And now, I will say that as a visual, art piece, this movie is great. If you just want to chill out with some, fantastic dystopian cinematography and, admire the actual art that goes behind our cinematography, then yeah, by all means, sign up for this. But character-wise, story-wise, religious metaphor-wise, I was just not there for it.
I think my overwhelmingly obvious issue walking away from this film is that I felt like I couldn't discern what was going on. And Mike, we've talked about this before with foreign films. Sometimes they're harder to follow. Sure, right? But normally after maybe about a half an hour, they sort themselves out. After an hour of watching this film, I still wasn't sure what was going on. I knew that this main character, played by Viktor Mikhailov, was attempting to get to the museum, and yeah, but
So the museum for this movie is sort of like the Ark in Oba.
Exactly.
That in Oba we knew for certain that the Ark did not exist because at the beginning we're told that it was made up for, said purposes. But in this, I guess we're not given that exact certainty that the museum, is or is not real, because people have gone and tried to get to it, but because of where it's uniquely situated, which is in this area that you can only get to when the tide is low, but it takes 6 days to get there, and that's exactly how long the tide lasts. So, which, if you get kind of in this world, whatever, caused the Earth to become dystopian, affected greatly the environment as it usually does. There's trash heaps, everything is very dirty and smoggy, and the ocean is more like a sludge. And like I said, all of that is really interesting to look at. It's all really interestingly shot, but otherwise, he's just trying to get to the museum for 2 hours and 8 minutes.
Well, he's trying to get there, but then he also gets sidetracked by the people that are in this house where he's staying. It seems like it's some sort of a way station before he goes there. And
because the people have to register to go to the island, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The museum, sorry. Sorry to give away the twist of the movie, but the museum is a giant fucking trash heap in the middle of the ocean. So,
well, I don't know if that's... I thought that he came back, and that was just the regular world that he was at, because there are scenes of him walking across basically what looks like a giant trash heap at the beginning as well.
Yeah, I don't think that he does actually necessarily get to the museum. I didn't think that he did, but I mean, I could also see the museum being a trash heap, and I would get that metaphor. I mean, I understand that, but yeah, that Mike, you said that he gets kind of sidetracked by this family that he ends up staying with while he's getting everything sorted out. And we learn that this world is sort of populated by, I guess, normal people, quote unquote, and then what they call degenerates, which evidently seem to be mentally handicapped people, and who I think are working in if you are a degenerate, you have to work in like labor camps, essentially, I think is what they are, because that's all you're good for. And so this family is trying to, I don't know what they're trying to do with their children who happen to be degenerates, but I guess they're trying to teach. I don't know, but he does spend a significant majority of this film with this family. And I'm not mad at that. I would totally be fine with that concept. I could not feel any connection to anything happening because, and Mike and Chris, we talked a little bit about this off podcast, but Chris and I had, the copy that we were watching had some subtitle and audio issues that may have skewed our viewing, but honestly, when I was sort of looking up, I wanted to try and do some research before this podcast, so I was reading a little bit about it, and I honestly, there's not a whole lot that I found like right off the bat for the movie. The one thing that I did find was titled Discerning Meaning, so if that gives you any more of an idea of how Chris and I fall, that title kind of helps out. But yeah, visually I found it interesting, and I think that it doesn't commit to, because there are some really kind of surreal and almost frightening and horrifying images in this, and for me, I wanted it to commit more to that. I don't feel like it ever really committed hard enough to the surrealness or absurdity. Just everything felt just a little bit too surface level or too reserved. Just one step not far enough.
So the lack of subtitles did kind of, it made me just be like, okay, so now I'm at the point where I'm just watching the film without any ability to interpret what's going on. And to be fair, that was only in like maybe the last 45 minutes of the film. Even looking for subtitles, just searching for them online and going through Plex and trying to find them, none of the options that I had worked. But I think for me, the issue is when it's compared to Lopushanskiy's other film, which you and I watched, Mike, the bar was set so high that this really is a big disappointment.
Yeah, I definitely liked this a lot more than you guys did. It was long. It was, it's a little bit north of 2 hours.
2 hours at least, and 8 minutes.
Yeah, and I don't know. I liked it. To me, it was very much this post-apocalypse was happening because of environmental issues. And they talk at one point when they're around the dinner table, because there are a couple dinner table scenes, but they talk at one point about the icebergs melting and that they'll never come back again, and just that the levels of the sea are rising, and that in 50 years, that it'll just be pretty much all gone. So this whole idea of the museum being in the middle of this ocean or being far enough away, like I couldn't discern if it was 3 days there, 3 days back, or if it was 6 days and then you had to stay there and then wait for the tide to go out again, and however long that takes. Just that whole idea I really liked, and just that it seems like the seas had risen enough that it created this island because of that. And when he gets to the island, to the museum, it seems, and this could just be me, but I thought the only thing that was really there was a church. And so this whole idea of the religious symbolism that's going through this whole thing, and that they're trying to teach these quote-unquote degenerates, the children, how to read the Bible, and that there's this other house that he goes to where there's this old man who is like, you can predict the future. Open up, or I can predict the future. Open up this book and read to me. And it's the Bible. Every single time they read from it, it's the Bible. That, and then him being this almost messiah figure to all of these workers who are degenerates. That felt very, it was them washing his hands and washing his feet. It was like this total Christ metaphor. I just was digging this. I was reminded, it was like a mix of like the first half of Stalker mixed with the last half of El Topo for me.
Now I see why you asked me if I had seen El Topo or not.
I have actually never seen El Topo. Stalker, I've seen parts. El Topo, no. I don't know. I mean, also, I can't say that, I dislike movies that are heavy in religious metaphor. That's not what I mean. But for me here, yeah, I don't know, the constant reading of the Bible and just the sort of need to teach these quote unquote degenerates, to teach them the Bible, just it doesn't quite sit well with me. And I do like, Mike, you said, I do like the concept of the island, of that whole setup, that whole kind of idea of the tide and you having a time limit to, essentially get to the end all be all of things to see in, the post-apocalyptic world. And that concept is used in what's it called? The Polanski movie, Cul-de-sac. Which, Chris, I don't know if you've seen. Mike, have you seen? I believe
I've seen parts of it. I haven't seen the whole thing. Okay.
Well, essentially, it's more of like a character-driven kind of psychological thriller thing with Donald Pleasance as this crazy man. But there's this house that these two thieves end up at, but the place that it's situated on is in an area where the tide comes in, so they end up getting stuck inside this house with Donald Pleasance, and things, weird shit happens. But I do like that just sort of like time limit isolation, where it's like eventually they know they're going to get out of what they need to get out of, but can they make it to that end point? And I don't know if he makes it. Like I said, I don't know. I don't think that I tend to more agree that maybe he didn't make it to the museum and that he just ends up back where he was.
It kind of feels like he goes in the museum and goes crazy, is how I was reading it.
I thought that the museum was just a giant trash pile because it talks about how it's the remnants of a former society of past civilizations, and all it was their garbage. And And but again,
which makes sense.
I mean, it's very cynical, right? I mean, that's a very cynical thing. I mean,
have any of these movies this month been particularly optimistic?
Dead Man's Letters, actually, which was other.
I didn't watch that one.
Which was the other Lopushanskiy film. I felt Mike was rather optimistic. I would say, shockingly so. Compared to
I can see that.
Yeah, well, I mean, he tells the kids about Christmas, and they go outside, and,
and they probably die in the radiation, but it's okay.
Radiation.
God damn you! I did walk away from this more... I like this more than Obi Oba, but I think that's because in this, I felt like there was more interesting stuff to look at.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at some point, like I said, I pretty much gave up on understanding what was going on because of the subtitle issue and the audio issue. But at the same time, I mean, I understood the gist of what was going on up until a point. And so, yeah, I think in the last, what are we saying, 40 minutes of the movie, it kind of transitions into him and this kind of, interesting Christ metaphor and, becomes very heavy with the religion. But it's the toughest watch we've had this month, I think, without a doubt. Wouldn't you say?
For me personally?
Well, for the two that you've seen, clearly.
The two that I've seen, yes, because I did not watch the other ones this month.
What about you, Mike? Would you say this is probably the toughest thing we've watched this month?
Yeah, probably.
But Lopushanskiy does a good job. I mean, I would say, it's a unique story if you look at it from the Obi Oba kind of angle of, where he's trying to go either doesn't exist or it exists, but be careful what you wish for because where you're going may drive you crazy, which is what happens to his character.
I enjoy this style of sci-fi. I think we talked about it on the last episode I was on. Just this realm of sci-fi that's more Twilight Zone centered of be careful what you wish for and, it's lessons and consequences and things like that. And I just think again, this movie is great to look at. And if, I were on some different substances, I would watch this movie again. But where Obi Oba works for me in this, is maybe just me being just, a simple, uncultured peon, is that I just have a character that I more so know what they're doing, why they're doing it, and the characters that the main guy meets along the way in Obi Oba are more interesting, they just more interesting in what they're doing, more interesting in how they're acted, just energy-wise. I like the way this color palette in this movie makes me uncomfortable. I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing, and that's very, color palette is intentional. But yeah, this just has a sort of overall just kind of filmy, dusty quality to it that just meanders and takes me out of it, unfortunately.
It's very similar to Dead Man's Letters.
But I mean, I still would like to watch Dead Man's Letters. You both enjoy that, and just because I didn't enjoy this particular film by him doesn't mean that I wouldn't, enjoy otherwise. But yeah, I would like to. I will have to check out Dead Man's Letters.
Yeah, I mean, I like this whole thing of them being in this house with the red outside, because it does remind me of that monochromatic thing that he was doing, the tinted black and white that he was doing in Dead Man's Letters. And I also like that they're in this house where there's fire on all the windows. It's kind of like the This Is Fine house, but it's basically they're in hell. It's like they've created their own hell, and they're just continuing to spew carbon monoxide into the atmosphere by doing this, and also, ruin the gene pool for their own kids.
Let's see, that sounds all so much more interesting than what I actually saw happen. And that's what I mean by I wish that it would have maybe committed more to not such... I mean, it's a low-energy movie. It's a real low-energy movie. And that's not necessarily a problem for me in particular, but when there's really nobody else, like, just for me, none of the performances were... Nobody was standing out and pushing it at all, really, for me. And that could, also be... There's always... for acting and for watching, foreign films, I think there's probably always a little bit of a barrier when it comes to judging acting, completely, because, I'm not fully aware of, just different cultural nuances, and I don't necessarily... I'm reading subtitles versus just, like, absorbing the line as they say it. So, yeah, there's a little bit of a disconnect there, but I guess with just Obi-Oba, and I can't say that there were, any fantastic actors in that, but the performances just had energy to them that I don't think anything here really did.
I just, this is a film that I also feel like doesn't really lend itself very easily to us talking about it either. Right? I mean, it's not like we're sitting here struggling going, this is a movie, what should we say? But at the same time, there is this kind of sense when we're sitting here talking about it that, not that I don't think we missed anything. I think that there's so much interpretation in this film that is internalized that, like I said, I mean, I didn't even interpret the ending the same way that y'all did. And that colored the way that I interpreted the film as a whole. And I mean, you can watch movies and interpret them one way or the other, but completely interpreting the ending in a different way, in my mind, changed the entire way that I felt about the film. And this is a first for us on here. We haven't had a movie like this in a while. A very long time, if ever. So, you always bring something new to the Culture Cast, Mike.
I do try.
Yeah.
You just broke March.
Mike broke March. It's this has been, I mean, look, outside of the stuff that's going on outside of our houses, these movies have been rough to watch this month, because there've been a lot of there's been some challenging topics, there's been some challenging films, and this is probably the most challenging. I think if we had watched this at the beginning of the month, I would have been completely lost. But being able to, like we've been talking about, Mike, reference the other movies we've seen makes this a little easier. Oh, this is like this, or this is like this, or this is like this. I mean, that has made this easier to understand for me as a film goer, because, again, this was kind of my first foray into heavier foreign sci-fi. All of them ended up being post-apocalyptic, but still, this was my first foray into really, like, very clearly foreign sci-fi. Well, what did you think of the two movies you watched, Jess? Would you want to go out and watch more foreign sci-fi films?
Yeah, I mean, I personally would. I liked Obi-Oba. I didn't necessarily like this movie as, a story. I liked what it looked like. I know that, I have a few in mind that I do want to see. So in general, the, drab dystopian sort of tone does not bother me. I just need, I need it to be a little more interesting. But yeah, I would definitely seek more out.
Well, and I to answer the same question, Mike, I'm totally on board to watch more foreign sci-fi films. I mean, this my kind of non
Hello, April. Woohoo! Oh, sorry.
Yeah, man. April's gonna be just as butt-fuckingly depressing as March.
No, at least we'll have good blaxploitation films to talk about. None of these take place after the apocalypse.
Right. Yeah, so next month we're going to be talking blaxploitation. So that's going to be a completely different bag to get into. It's a bag that we've already opened on this podcast once before. So I'm looking forward to that a lot, obviously, because we've got a lot of really interesting films planned. I would say this time around it's probably going to be more blaxploitation than last time. More like hard blaxploitation.
Hold on a second. You did a blaxploitation month before, but there wasn't blaxploitation.
Mike, does that sound right to you? Is that statement kind of correct?
I would say it was
What'd you do?
quasi blaxploitation.
Tangentially related.
Well,
I mean, there was Petey Wheatstraw.
Petey Wheatstraw, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. What else?
Petey Wheatstraw. What else did we do? We did Black Mama, White Mama, but I guess that podcast never aired, so that was fun. We also talked about the one with Coffin Ed and Gravedigger Jones.
Oh, Cotton Comes to Harlem?
Yeah, that. So that's blaxploitation. I keep getting our blaxploitation month confused with the time I did Superfly for your podcast.
Well, and you had Trouble Man.
That's true.
You had Trouble Man, Cotton Comes to Harlem, Petey Wheatstraw, and Black Mama, White Mama.
Yeah, but only 3 of those aired. So, I mean, they're blaxploitation. I just, I don't know. They, when you think of blaxploitation, the stuff we're talking about next month, I think is more in line with what I expected, which is not necessarily a good or bad thing. I mean, it's not like these are hard drawn lines to some extent. So
Hey, all those movies are in my blaxploitation book. So
all right, the one that you wrote.
no, I did not.
Jess Byard's big book of blaxploitation film.
Yeah, nope, I am never going
love
to
it.
Jess
this
Byard on
guy.
the back. Thumbs up, everybody.
Super white. Here's
White
my
woman
book
from
about
Ohio writes
blaxploitation.
book about blaxploitation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would go over swimmingly.
I mean, do you have to be African American to enjoy blaxploitation? I don't think so.
No, but I'm not going to write the definitive book on it.
That's true. You could. Nothing's precluding you. We've got all the time in the world. But I tell you what, Mike, I'm curious.
My glasses broke.
Do what?
My glasses broke.
Oh shit! That's what happens in Time Enough at Last, Mike.
That's true.
Exactly.
I thought the thing was isn't the new version like I'm going deaf now?
I don't care what the new version is.
Sure. Yeah, Adam Scott is probably in it.
Yeah, right. It's a Dan Carlin podcast. Mike, for you, since you were here the entire month, what is your pick if you're going to watch one film this month? If you're going to suggest one film be watched this month, which one would you choose?
In April?
In
Of the ones that we covered?
Yeah, in March, for Mike White March.
Oh, the ones that we covered. I mean, I was so glad that you took to Dead Man's Letter so much. I would say people should watch that.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not going to say which one you should avoid because, again, it's purely subjective, and I think that a good list doesn't necessarily have to have a bad list counterpart. I think that's...
Yeah, but I would say Secrets of Steel City. Maybe you can avoid that one.
I'm not going to say it, but that fucking movie.
See, I would say a visitor to a museum. Maybe you can avoid that one.
I still think I'm with Mike. I still think Secrets of Steel City is probably the most boring movie we watched all month.
On that one.
I wouldn't suggest anyone watch it. It's just very dry.
Although, just thinking, like, we're ending Mike White March, and I'm just thinking of how just polar opposite Mike White March is from Jess Byard June.
It's very true. Jess Byard June is going to be very decadent, and this is very...
It will be.
Oh, it'll be a bacchanalia.
So what would you give this film out of 5, Mike?
Like I said, I like this more than you guys. I would actually give it a 3.
Jess?
I don't know. Part of me feels like I just didn't appreciate or understand this movie enough to actually give it a rating, but I won't cop out and not give it a rating, so I'm just going to give it a 2.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 2 as well. Again, I mean, I think you're right, Jess. Giving it a 2, maybe I didn't interpret it the right way. Maybe my interpretation clouded my judgment.
And maybe I haven't seen enough of these movies to appreciate it as much as, while there are, sometimes going into these, darker corners of cinema and film, as you were, then sort of, I don't know if it were, at least, I don't know if this is for you guys, but for me, if I'm venturing into a realm of cinema that I'm not particularly well versed in, then I don't always feel comfortable outright not liking a movie because I don't feel like I've had the sort of, for lack of a better term, education on the subject. to really like appreciate that, but that could just be me.
I mean, I could see that. I mean, I agree with that somewhat. I mean, having a quote-unquote educated opinion on things, you know, everybody is entitled to their opinion, but someone with an educated opinion on a topic like foreign sci-fi, Eastern European sci-fi film, maybe, you know, their opinion on this film would probably be drastically different from maybe even the three of our opinions, you know. So I could see that. I could see that 100%. So, but let's take a break and we'll play a preview for the next Culture Cast.
Hide your mamas. Big brother is coming. And he's coming on strong. Isaac Hayes, the big brother of soul, is making a new kind of music. And it's mean jive.
All right, y'all, let's move. If anybody asks you what happened, tell them you've been hit by a truck. Matt Truck Turner.
When he's hottest, he's the coolest.
Hey,
Could have brought me some flowers.
I got some beer.
When he's baddest,
What do you want for breakfast?
he's the best.
What do you think?
Every gun brother and sister is out to make the big hit.
I want that Truck Turner and I want him dead.
But he's out to get before he's got. Isaac Hayes, as a skip tracer, a modern-day bounty hunter, making a healthy living by making living unhealthy for cats who skip bail.
Gentlemen, this is my family. These all prime cut $238,000 worth of dynamite is Fort Knox in pennies. That's Taffy. Her clients call her Colonel Sanders because she's finger-licking good. The man who kills him gets my broads.
Truck, they gonna kill you.
They're gonna have to do just that. Because they owe me. I'm gonna collect.
When he gets it on, the action takes off. Isaac Hayes, the magic name of music, winner of the Academy Award for his music in Shaft and scoring again in this one. Truck Turner from American International Pictures.
That's right, in the next Culture Cast, we're going to be talking about a blaxploitation film, Truck Turner. We're going there. I've never seen it. I know nothing about it. I'm excited.
I brought some beer.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it.
Is that a line from the movie?
It is.
Okay. I was
Or you just saying I brought some beer.
and we're going to be joined by our good friend, the missing part of the quadrangle here, our good friend Father Malone, a.k.a. Mike Wallace. Until then, what have you been up to, Mr. Mike White?
Well, when I'm not recording this podcast with you, Chris, I am recording one about Barney Miller with you, which is called The Life and Times of Captain Barney Miller, which you can find now over on Spreaker. And I do something called the Projection Booth, which I do once a week, projectionboothpodcast.com.
The adult version of this podcast. Or we're the child version of your podcast. This is what did I call it on the couch? The children's table? The children's table. Hey, you know what? It suits it, more or less, you know. Sometimes the adult comes down and talks to the kids, and then he goes back to do his adult
that
things.
was today.
I'm so glad to join you. You guys want to learn about this right now? Fuck off. Be quiet down there. Oh, man. Where can people find you, Jess?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at writer Jess Byard, and you can find me on our show, Chris, the one season show, where we talk about television shows that lasted only one season, and we are just about to wrap up our second season. You can check that out, and you can also stay tuned for our upcoming podcast, Scary Stories We Tell, which kind of traverses the trails of true crime paranormal and unexplained events, and horror culture. So we'll have interviews, we'll have deep dives, we'll have one-off Monster of the Week episodes. Something for everybody.
I sure hope so. Does your co-host know that you're on this podcast?
I don't know, does he?
I don't know. Does he? That was a weird question to ask, wasn't it? As for me,
it was almost supernatural.
As for me, there's not a whole lot left to plug. Chronicles from the Crypt podcast and Dreams for Sale. And that's it. And follow me on Twitter, casualty_Chris. Big thanks, as always, to Tiger Blood Jewel for the Bayou. Big thanks to Mike White. Mike White March is over. Again, that's 3 years in the books.
Wow, nice.
I look forward to it every year, Mike. I really do. It's the month I know I'm going to be pushed to my cinematic limits. In a good way. Yes. Thank you. Damn you people! What do you want me to say?
I was just waiting for you to say bye, so I could.
Just come on down to the next podcast, because we'll still be here, and hopefully you will be too.